Okay, I think we're live, everybody. We don't have a fancy intro or anything. I was planning on that, but I haven't figured that out yet. So hey, in case you're wondering, nobody wants to just see. Haven't figured that out yet. Oh, whoa. So hey. Oh, I got to shut my YouTube down. See, first technical glitch. Okay. Nash is coming. He's just a little bit late here. But welcome to EXJW-Live, everyone. And of course, we have the one and only Jason here. What to say to start out? I guess, we like to laugh and have fun on this channel, and especially with Jason, but I guess it's a little different right now. This is what happened in Germany is not something to laugh about, and I guess Nash is watching. So that's why we're here. I think it's important, and I think you would agree, Jason, that our kind of perspective on this is brought in. Because I mean, these are our people. I mean, we left, but I mean, we spent our whole life in this organization. So, these are our people, even though they don't consider us their people anymore. But I mean, this is just such a terrible thing, and we feel it too. And we're going to have a lot to say on that. And we're going to have a specific point of view as well. The point of view of the ex-JW that's going to have maybe some perspective that like the news organizations are not going to have. Hey, would you not agree with that?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I think there is always going to be an affinity between ourselves and Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
I think we can never lose that, just because we'll always have family members that are connected to them. We may not agree with anything, or we may agree with just some of what they do. But I mean, when Jehovah's Witnesses get hurt, we feel their pain as much as anyone else. And in many cases, we understand what they're going through more than anyone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we grew up with them. This was like our whole life for decades, you know what I mean? And, just because we are on the opposite side of things now, and are desiring to change some of their practices, it doesn't mean that we want anything bad to happen to these people. These are family for us. And like I say, even though they wouldn't speak to us, I would have no problem having JWs over to my house for dinner. I don't have any issues with them personally. So, this was a terrible thing. And we feel this, we feel for those people. And, I think that's one of the first things that maybe we could say is to express our condolences to the families and these people that had this happen. This is horrible and terrible and sad. This is horrendous.
Well, you just think yourself, if you were at the Kingdom Hall yourself, because I mean, that's what we did most of for a lot of our lives. We got up on after work, we'd come home, we'd shower, we'd shave, we get our suits on, our dresses on, whichever it is. We'd
sometimes in a rush.
We'd head off to the Kingdom Hall. We'd have our meetings. I mean, you don't expect anything bad to happen. In fact, you expect, we have our service meeting and all the rest, and then afterwards, you want to enjoy the time afterwards where you can chat and hug and catch up with friends and family and people that you haven't seen all week. You don't expect someone to be coming in with a gun and shooting all around and seeing people lying on the ground dead, because that's exactly what's happened here. Is this guy just comes in, shoots in the window, cops in, and just starts shooting at everyone.
So why don't we start here, Jay? Because you're a smart guy. You follow all the details. Maybe, I don't know, give us a rundown from your, like, what you've researched. What happened exactly? What do we know right now? about the events that took place here.
Right. Well, let's just talk about the day itself, the Thursday, right? It was a language group of about 40 to 50 people. So there was about, I think, 36 individuals at the Kingdom Hall, and there was 25 people online, right? The service ended at 8:45. And at 8:45, it was those online was shut off. Foos, which is the name of the shooter, he comes into the car park or to the street, and there was one of the members, a female, had come out and she was getting into her car. She got into her car, and then he started shooting her. He shot about 10 bullets into her car. She got away with minor injuries, but she was able then to quickly alert the police. Meanwhile, he shoots in the window into the Kingdom Hall, hops in, and starts shooting all around him. Thankfully, the police were nearby.
Yeah, I've heard that they got there pretty quickly.
Yeah, so they were able. I mean, that's the most fortunate thing here, is that the police were nearby and were able to react immediately, because he had rounds and rounds of ammunition with him, and he could have killed everyone in there with the amount of ammunition he had if he had the time to do it. But he only literally had 5 or 10 minutes, and in 5 or 10 minutes, he had shot 8 people, 7 people dead, 4 men, 2 women, and an unborn child, and he had injured 8 other people. And then
there may be more deaths too.
There might, but hopefully not, because the 4 people are seriously injured, but hopefully not.
Yeah.
But when the police arrived, then he runs upstairs, and he gets upstairs. The police followed him up, and by the time they got up there, they heard the shot, and he had killed himself. His gun lying on the ground, he's lying there dead. So in total, there was 8 deaths, including himself. And so that's really the series of events.
What is a language group like? What is going, like, it's a separate language? It wasn't German. They were like, I don't understand what they, like, I've been out of the game for a while. What is this, like a meeting, but it's in a different language? Is that all?
Yeah, that's usually what it is. Yeah, so it's a language group that might be dealing with a particular language group in the area. Right, so you could, I don't know what language group they were, but you could, let's just assume that it was, I think someone might know, it might have been Romanian or something. Someone in the group might know who it was, but I think they were Romanian, and so they would be dealing with Romanian people. That would be their area, their territory, to reach out to Romanian speakers. So that's what a language group is. They weren't there when I was an active Jehovah's Witness, but it seems to be in recent years the way to kind of attract people of more groups, simply because the world has become more global. Jehovah's Witnesses are trying to react to that. You go to any city now, there's people talking various languages.
Yeah, like I know that, and especially in countries like Germany and Canada, where they have so much immigration, right? That I know even in my family, I don't really know much about what goes on with my family, but I know a couple of my nephews, I think, are in separate language groups, right? They're learning different languages for the different, and like I say, I know Germany has a lot of immigration, so they probably, I mean, how big is Hamburg? How big is that city? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Yeah, I wonder. I'm not going to Google it. Doesn't matter. So, there's a lot to talk about here. We are going to obviously get into the reason why our perspective is important is because, when you listen to the news reports, they're not going to really talk about the perpetrator of the act, and how some of the policies, even though it may not, I mean, obviously mental illness here is probably the number one thing going on with the perpetrator of this act, but there's other things to consider that the news organizations are almost definitely not going to talk about, right?
Well, just on that, it's just worth pointing out that news organizations have to be very careful, because we're talking about a religious group here. We're not talking about extremism, because they've ruled out extremism in the we'll say in the terrorist sense. They've seen that this guy is kind of an extremist in his religious views and his views in general when you look at his book. But we're not talking about extremism in the political sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about a religious group. So you have to be careful with a religious group, especially a minority religious group such as Jehovah's Witnesses, that you do not start going in, encroaching and trying to interpret the religious beliefs. So you have to present the news in a very neutral way.
Yeah.
So they may allude to certain things, but they can't really speak about them. Not the way that you and I can speak about them or any other ex-JW can speak about them. And that's what we have. We have the right to be able to speak about Jehovah's religious beliefs because we are Jehovah's Witnesses, whether we would like it or not. If you become baptized as a Jehovah's Witness, you are still a Jehovah's Witness because that's what identifies you for. So we can talk about it. And there is a lot to talk about, I think.
And I hate to qualify so much, but we're going out live. People watch this later. This isn't what we're going to say is not in any way a defense of this individual. Okay, these were people that were trying to worship their God in their own way, and everybody should be free to do that in the safety of whatever church or kingdom hall or mosque that you want to worship in. So even though we may go into areas where the Watchtower organization may contribute to an individual's mental state or sanity, this is in no way a defense of what this person did. What this person did is terrible and horrible, and we need to get that out of the way first, right, Jason?
Yeah. So I just think that with the with this, it's like we have to dissect what we believe is the motive. I mean, who's just mentioned there? Fritz has just mentioned no manifesto was released, so police will be digging for motives, and police will be digging for motives. Yeah. But what we can do is we can assess from our own personal experience and from our own knowledge. I mean, over the years, there have been other murders of Jehovah's Witnesses, and typically Jehovah's Witnesses, the greatest threat to Jehovah's Witnesses are other Jehovah's Witnesses. Not mainly outsiders. I mean, we let's just ignore countries like Russia for the moment. I mean, they are under threat in that country, and then in other countries where they are banned. But typically in the free world, Jehovah's Witnesses are not under threat by anyone. But there have been instances of people coming into the Kingdom Halls or at other events where they have murdered Jehovah's Witnesses. For example, we have that case where the lady had murdered her husband and children and then killed herself back in 2018. In 2022, you had that gentleman, former Jehovah's Witness, who went into a Kingdom Hall, shot his wife, and then shot himself.
Right.
Then you had that individual that made a movie about him, Christian something or other. He murdered his wife and children, then fled to Mexico, Cancun, Mexico. He then got caught. He's now in prison on death row, awaiting death, obviously. And so, there are cases of Jehovah's Witnesses being threatened by other Jehovah's Witnesses and have been killed. But I think what we have to point out with the whole shunning thing is that long sustained shunning has unpredictable results. And we've seen that over the years. And that's why shunning is a key contributor to people reacting the way this shooter went in and killed a whole load of people. If he wasn't shunned, would he have done it? It's possible. We have to admit that it's quite possible that he would have still done this. He looks like he was a bit unhinged. Not a bit unhinged, but was seriously unhinged. He wasn't right in the head. He writing the crazy book about God and saying that he got a dream, this sort of thing, and he was led to believe that even Hitler and Putin were used by Christ to inflict pain on humanity for their sins. So he wasn't right in the head. He obviously wasn't right in the head. So would he have done this if he wasn't shunned? It's hard to know. But why would he have done it otherwise?
Yeah,
I'm not saying it was the shunning, but what would drive someone to go to that ultimate place of, he had written a book in December 2022, and this is only 3 months later. And he just decides one day, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to shoot up a whole lot of people, because he got his gun around the same time. He picked up his gun around December. And then there was this anonymous letter that the police received in February 2022. And then they went to follow it up, and they seemed normal, nothing out of the sorts. Yep. But you have to wonder, why did he get the gun shortly after he published the book, or around the same time as he published the book? So there's a lot of questions to be asked, and a lot of questions to be answered to find out the motive, the real motive behind why this guy did the ultimate, kill so many people and then end up killing himself.
Yeah. I'm left to wonder, and you know what, I actually don't wonder, because I pretty much know the answer, I think, how the Watchtower would react to something like this. Unfortunately, we're not dealing with an organization here that it would look at their policies and say, okay, this person was mentally unstable. Obviously, this may not be the main reason, but maybe we need to look at our shunning policy. Is this a contributing factor? Is this a contributing, no matter, what percentage it is it a contributing factor? And should we look at this maybe in light of the safety of our followers? Unfortunately, and we all know this, the Watchtower is not an organization that would probably respond in that way, would they, Jason?
I don't think so. I think like Jehovah's Witnesses are kind of extreme in their own way of doctrine. Theirs is the only way. Anyone that even questions them, unless they follow the teachings exactly as it's told in Watchtower, they will be expelled for apostasy. So they are extreme in the sense of how they view their own teachings. So they're nearly as extreme and as dogmatic as even the shooter in the sense of the mentality. And you can't say to a Jehovah's Witness, have you ever looked at your shunning policy and thought maybe this is a problem? When you look at all the other things that have gone on over the years. And they're not going to say, oh, yeah, maybe we look at it. No, they're going to say, well, 1 Corinthians 5, verses 13 says this. So, we have to cut people off. That's what we do. It's biblically mandated. And they can't see any other way. Even though when you look at the verse, they're kind of taking it out of context, and they extend it beyond what Paul was talking about, because Paul wasn't talking about a lot of things that they put in to expel people. But they use this same verse to cover every aspect of shunning. Yep. So that's the unfortunate thing. You're dealing with extremism on one side, and then you're dealing with extremism on the other side. So you have two sets of Jehovah's Witnesses. You have the former Jehovah's Witnesses and the current Jehovah's Witnesses. They're both extreme in their own way.
Exactly. Look at some of the comments here. Nesbo says, I expect some active JWs will see this and use it as a reason, as a reason he was removed from the congregation, that he had a bad heart, and this is proof that he shouldn't have been part of the organization anyway. So they will, there is some members, but even the organization itself will, that's how they'll respond. Oh, see, this person should have been expelled anyway. Instead of looking at it truthfully, all three of us and any ex-JW that has left the organization and left the cult mentality, now we have more of an ability to see the truth, because we're not hindered by this belief system that we have to follow. And the truth is that, yeah, the person was probably unhinged. Maybe the person was a bad person, but there's probably other mitigating factors, and the organization just won't go there. They won't go there.
Well, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think the other thing too is the fact that there's no real help for crazy people in Watchtower.
Yeah. Look what Fritz has said here.
Yeah, exactly. There's they're not going to tell you to get professional counseling. And if somebody has real mental issues, the last thing you want to do is push them over the edge. And that's not to say that that's the congregation's fault or the elders' fault for what this guy did. But the reality is, in all kinds of situations, they just stick somebody all on their own. They isolate them by disfellowshipping them or secluding them, and then they do terrible things. And lots of times, more than we'll never have numbers on it, but lots of times it ends in someone's own life, and they'll take their own life. And the Watchtower doesn't say anything about that. That doesn't make the news. Nobody seems to care. But all that person needed was that little push, and this lunatic got a push. And I mean, it's not the only reason, but like you said, that's what we're here to talk about, is that the press can't talk about these damaging policies and how they make these issues worse in people, but we can.
Yeah, but Nash, this is where, just on that point, it's just the whole treatment and how the judicial process works within Jehovah's Witnesses. Just thinking of myself, when I was disfellowshipped back in 2001, the reason why I never went back, and I had said this to my mother at the time, I says, it was then I needed them most, but they expelled me. I said, why did they expel me when I need them most? This is the time I need spiritual help and spiritual comfort, not to be kicking me out. I said, that's the easy route to go and kick someone out when they're down, when they're spiritually, deficit. But this is the easy way for Jehovah's Witnesses. It's easier to kick someone out than to actually help someone. So when you look at this killer, right, it's easy for Jehovah's Witness to say, you know what, we kicked him out. But he had mental issues. He had mental issues. What did you do to help this guy, to try and make him so that he wouldn't be a guy that would ultimately do what he did? And this is the big issue with Jehovah's Witnesses, is everything is reliant on the 67th book of the Bible. This one, Shepherd the flock of God. That's what it is. It's like, it doesn't say what to do in here about helping someone. Yeah. It says what he did something wrong, so we have to kick him out.
It says how to punish him.
It's just it's very clinical. And that's the problem with Jehovah's Witnesses. And
you know what?
It's probably so clinical because there's no women permitted to be in positions of authority. And it's women that can actually help men to get out of the whole clinical aspect and get in the whole emotional aspect, because that's what you need. You need a bit of feeling in here. And that's what's missing.
It's along with that. It's so interesting in my case that I'm dealing with accessing my records, which is still ongoing. This is what a lot of people that are not witnesses don't understand. They think that the information that I'm trying to access is confessional in nature, like a regular parishioner going to their priest and saying, hey, I'm having issues here. And the priest responds with some guidance and, hey, some comfort. And I'm like, no, that's not what I'm trying to access here with the witnesses. This is a secret court case, right? There's no confessional. There's nothing confessional here. Now, I don't deny that some of this stuff does go on in the witnesses, but the vast majority of information that they're holding is secret court cases, all to do with punishment and getting rid of people that they don't want in their organization. Right. So this is what these elders are trained to do mostly, is to punish people, and to the details about these secret court cases that go on behind closed doors that nobody knows about. Right. And that is probably most of what their job is and what they're taught to do. Unfortunately.
That's right. And it's funny, I can speak to even what Jason said. I went through a similar thing when I had my issues years ago, and I was dealing with PTSD from my brother's suicide and some other issues, and drinking was the way I medicated it. And the elders, basically, they just wanted me out. It had gotten to a point they didn't know what to do, and they don't offer any real help. for anybody with any kind of an issue with substance abuse. And so their book says to give them the boot. And it's interesting because every recovery program I went to, one of the first things they ask you about is your support system. What's your support system? Yeah. And you just lost it. You don't have one. So now your support system is this group of guys that all have the same problem, but it's completely different because they're not in a cult and they haven't gone through what you have. And you're just kind of floundering, waiting to come back. And when I came back, it was different. It was never the same again. And so that feeling of like kind of that, I don't know, sometimes it feels safe when you're in and accepted, but that feeling was never back. So the second time I went out, it was, it was almost like that break had already been made, and it was cleaner that second time because they had no interest in helping the individual. They had an interest in making sure that they did what their book told them to do, so they could tell the CO, we cleaned that up. That guy's out, and end of story. We don't care. Our hands are washed of it.
Yeah.
I go back. I listened to one news report that talked about so more information is coming in the news, and I don't know if you've heard this, Nash or Jason, but they talked about the shooter here. And they said that the individual, speaking about their relationship to the organization, they said they left voluntarily, but not on good terms, right? And those of us that are ex-JWs will know exactly what that is, right? I mean, I had a very similar situation where I wanted to leave, but I didn't want all the punishment and the harsh treatment that comes along with that, right? And so this was my situation too. I kind of left voluntarily. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but not on good terms, right? Like where you're like, okay, I want to go, but do you have to follow through with this harsh and terrible treatment that you're going to take away my whole support group? You're going to take away all my family? Do we really have to do this? Well, apparently they did.
Yeah, just on that, Greg, this is where I wonder, when they say voluntarily, that doesn't mean that he decided just to leave of his own volition.
Yeah.
Right. Because we talk about disassociation. Disassociation is for 4 reasons, right? And the first reason is that you say that you want to leave. You don't want to be no longer known. But then there's the 3 other reasons. One is Christian neutrality. So Christian neutrality is where you either join the army, the armed forces, or you vote in general elections, political elections of some sort, or you go for a governmental office. So you've kind of you've violated your Christian neutrality, and that's not you saying you don't want to be a Jehovah's Witness anymore. Yeah. That's the elders saying you're out because you've decided you no longer want to be a Jehovah's Witness, right? Then the other reason is because you've joined another religious group. And then the other one is because you've taken a blood transfusion and you want to save your life. But that one is the interesting one, is that you joined another religious group. So when you look at this murderer, he had created his own religion. He had created this book that he thinks it's going to be brilliant and it's going to be relevant 100 years from now. That's what he said about it. He said an awful lot of things about the book and how amazing it is and how great it is. But it's basically The Truth About God, Jesus, and Satan is the title of the book. And it could easily be construed by the Jehovah's Witnesses that he has deviated from the Jehovah's Witnesses' belief. He's set up his own religion. So he has decided that he no longer wants to be identified as Jehovah's Witness, so he's disassociated. So he voluntarily left, but maybe he didn't leave of his own choosing, and therefore he didn't leave on good terms.
I don't know anyone that leaves on good terms.
Now, we're only speculating here, so let's be clear about that. We're only speculating,
yes,
but there is that possibility, and we have to look at all the possibilities.
Well, it's very plausible. I mean, I'm a perfect example of when they say I left voluntarily, which is in court documents. All I did was write an article in the newspaper that said nothing about Jehovah's Witnesses. I didn't say anything about them. I did identify myself as an agnostic. I identified myself as agnostic. So did I voluntarily leave the Watchtower? Well, they considered it that, right? But it's not as clear cut as they want to make it out to be, you know?
But the thing is, though, Greg, the problem with that idea of saying that they've disassociated or they chose no longer to be one. Well, then you could actually say that about every disfellowshipping offense. Well, he did something that's he committed immorality. So that he has shown by his actions that he no longer wants to be a Jehovah's Witness, so he's disassociated himself. But so why is it that in certain sins it's a disfellowshipping and on other sins it's a disassociation? And when the discipline and the action and the resulting shunning is the same and the announcement is the exact same, there is no difference really. They're just different words they use for doing the same thing.
Yes, and it's funny because I've been reading a few articles. I've been kind of following anybody who's posting about what happened in Germany, people that have no relation to the Jehovah's Witnesses, and they'll give like a little brief history of the Jehovah's Witnesses, or they'll talk about their policies. And every time they talk about disfellowshipping, they'll say it's when somebody's broke a scriptural principle or violated the rules. They never, ever mention the fact that if you change your belief system or if you don't agree with their doctrine, it's the exact same punishment. And that's to your point, Jason.
Yeah. So that's, and I just keep coming back to this. Like how do you think the Watchtower is going to respond to this? Because
it's that just on that, right? How are they going to respond? This is what I find very interesting, right? So they did a breaking news. Now I did tweet about it being a breaking news. I don't know why they're calling it a breaking news, because breaking news is kind of tabloidist in its approach.
Yeah,
it's kind of like breaking news. Look, people have died in our congregations.
Yeah,
the Watchtower has changed so much over the years.
It's very insensitive to their members. Why would you say that this is breaking news? It's sad news. You don't put it up as a breaking news. But the thing is, I think they put it up as a breaking news, even though they were 14 hours late, so it wasn't really breaking by the time they put it up as breaking news. But also they're saying, that the usual stuff. It's always the same kind of boilerplate text that they use. But what's interesting is, and some journalists pointed it out on one of the medias, that media outlets, he mentioned the fact that this guy had said an awful lot of things about he seems to be a consultant, a management consultant. That's how he's trying to sell himself on his website, right? But he's also intermingling religious texts and biblical texts with this management style, which kind of shows him to be kind of extreme and kind of has a fundamentalist view, right? And he quoted one of the verses, and one of the verses he quoted was about a refuge and strength from God, and quoted it was Psalms 46 verses 1 and 2 is what the shooter had on his website. But Jehovah's Witnesses, on their breaking news, at the very end, the last sentence, they say, "We are confident that Jehovah, the God of peace, will continue to be a refuge and strength in this time of distress." And among other scriptures, they quote Psalms 46 verses 1. They quote the exact same verse that the shooter has on his website. Now, that's a pure coincidence. Really? I'm sure they didn't mean to do that. But what it shows is where this extremist and fundamentalist view comes from in the first place. Because when you look at any of the stuff that the shooter has on his website, it's very Jehovah Witness in its outlook. And so that fundamentalist view can only come from one place for this guy.
Yeah, that's a common practice. They always say something and then they quote a scripture, and that way, when a Jehovah's Witness is asked where that viewpoint comes from, they say, "Well, look, it's all scripturally backed. It's all scripturally based because I quoted 1 Corinthians 3 and 15 after it, and so now that means Jehovah said it." And that's what Watchtower does. I think my one of the things that concerns me is as an ex-Jehovah's Witness, and I'm in a small town, and already people that are witnesses are afraid of me in some way, even though I've never been involved in any kind of altercation with the witnesses. For the most part, one elder, I think I kind of got into it with a couple times, which he approached me. But otherwise, I've never done anything other than put up the odd poster, but nothing threatening or whatever. Never gone to their Kingdom Hall. But they're scared to come to the same coffee shop as me. The other day, they turned around and walked back out when they saw me there with my family. And I kind of worry about the fear that witnesses must feel, because my kids still go to these meetings, my parents, the rest of my family. Like, if they're already afraid of us just for what we think, when they see stories like this, you know, I can't imagine the fear-mongering that's going to go on, that all ex-witnesses, because they think Satan, you know, we've already fallen into Satan's control because we think these things. So what's next? Are we going to go shoot up a Kingdom Hall? Like, they must be capable of it. That's my worry, is that believing witnesses will think that we're all capable of these atrocities because Satan is controlling us. And that's kind of the most worrisome thing for me, because I think it'll make a lot of people double down in their shunning and in their fear. They have enough to be afraid of. They're already afraid of Armageddon.
Yeah, Nash, actually, just on that, I used to go to the Kingdom Hall before in 2017. I turned up, but I had a backpack. I didn't have your normal meeting bag, because I've been out of the witnesses for so long. But I had this backpack, and I used to put in all the Bibles. I had the green Bible, the silver Bible, the black Bible. And I'd turn up, and I'd go in, and I'd sit down, and then I'd open up the backpack, and I'd pull out all the Bibles and put them down beside me. And then I'd pick up one randomly when a verse was being done in one of the public talks. But anyways, the Jehovah's Witnesses stopped to allow me attending their events. They tried to block me a few times, and then eventually at an assembly, they had about 20 people blocking that door and wouldn't let me in, right? And I didn't think too much about it at the time, but I did take up a discrimination case against them. And in the discrimination case, it says, look, I'm a Jehovah's Witness and they're not letting me in. I ultimately didn't win the case, but I didn't really want to win it. That wasn't the reason for taking the discrimination. But what was interesting was that during that hearing, the three elders that were sitting in on it, one of them brought up the fact that I came in with a backpack. They said, look, Jason would come in and he'd sit down at the back and he'd have a backpack. And she goes, a backpack? This is the judge. She goes, a backpack? What's wrong with the backpack? Well, we have young children at our meetings, and you just don't know. And she goes, are you trying to insinuate that there could be a bomb? Well, you just don't know. We have young children in our Kingdom Hall. So I was sitting there, and I just went down and I picked up my backpack. I said, this is my backpack. I have it here today as well. I have all my stuff inside it. This is that backpack he's talking about. But to your point, this is the real fear, that someone like an ex-JW who's under the control of Satan could be a suicide bomber coming into the Kingdom Hall. But when they're fed this information about us, that we're all nut jobs and that we're all liable to kill them or harm them in some way, not just spiritually, but maybe physically, the fear is real.
Yeah, I never even thought of that, and how it's so amazing. Isn't it amazing how cults can twist things, and use it to their advantage? I mean, and I never even thought about that they might use this as more of a motivation, to demonize ex-witnesses. Unbelievable.
On that point, I think it's Pablo Partigiano or something on Twitter. He had made an interesting point. I don't know if he commented on one of mine or it was his own tweet, but he talked about how we use ex-JW kind of as a label. And he said that's why he's trying to go away from that and more towards being victims. And I know I don't love the word victim because I don't consider myself a victim, but and I think that's kind of what he was getting at, is to make it seem less like we're, a group that's in complete opposition to them. Yeah. Because, an opposition group is capable or wants to do harm in some way. Right. But we have no interest in harming Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
And I think we've been over that a million times. But
I think that's great advice. If any, buddy watches this now or later, I think, there's so many good things in life to move on with and enjoy, right? And those of us that have kind of activism in its proper place, I mean, we're just trying to change a few policies. It doesn't govern our whole entire life, and I think that's what you want to aim for, right? To have this activism that what we do is just a small part of your life. It's not, if you're going to sleep and waking up in the morning and all you think about is ex-JW stuff, you might need to take a break for a while. Hey?
Actually, just funny. Here's an activity for the viewers: is if they go onto Google Maps and just type in victims of Jehovah's Witnesses, what do they find? Because they will find something.
I don't know. Is it just Spain or?
No, it's not just Spain. They should do it. I don't want to say what it is, but if they do, just if someone does a search for it, maybe they can post it in the chat what they do find.
Yeah.
Because I identify myself as a victim of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Right.
I identify myself as a victim of Jehovah's Witnesses because I have lost things. I have been harmed by Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah.
I have no fear in saying that, and I don't dislike calling myself a victim. And I want people to.
I just did it.
Yeah.
Well, you're speaking to somebody like me because we've had this conversation. Oh, you did it.
Yeah.
You're speaking to somebody like me who does. I don't like calling myself a victim, but you're right. We are victims, right? And you know who else is victims? Like my children are victims. They don't have a family.
Yeah.
Like they don't have, like they have my wife's family, but they don't have my side of the family. None, zero family, right? They don't know anything of the history. So we are victims. There's no question about
Well,
that.
my family even has distanced themselves from my kids.
Yeah.
And my kids still attend meetings. There's no real reason for it.
When I talk to my kids about my family, I have to describe who I'm talking about because they don't know them. Right. You should be able to just say, oh, Joe or Jane or Auntie Brenda. I have to say, oh, this person, and she's related to that person. You met this person 5 years ago.
At a funeral.
Yeah.
I turned up at the Kingdom Hall one time, right? Because I used to do this. I actually enjoyed going because I did. I had my reasons, but I also liked the reaction because the elders got awful nervous, even though I just sit there and I'd listen. But one time I came in, it was a Thursday night meeting, and I sat down. But on the same row was my family that don't speak to me. So right beside me was one of my nephews. I'd say he was only about 4 or 5 at the time. He was sitting right beside me. Then beside him was his brother, and then his mother, and then his father, and my mother then, right in the row. And he was drawn there. And then the prayer came on, and I didn't close my eyes. And he says, he was there. You know how they do? They kind of close their eyes and they kind of look and at everything and see. And he goes, "You don't have your eyes closed." I said, "I know. I don't close my eyes." But he was drawing then during the meeting, right? And I said, "Oh, that's really good stuff you're doing there, And then he asked me, "Who are you?"
No.
I said, "I'm your uncle."
Oh, no.
No. I said, "I am." And he turns to his mom. "He's my uncle."
It's funny
cute.
but sad at the same time.
Yeah, it's bittersweet. But yeah, it brought a tear to my eye because his eyes just lit up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Family, I didn't know.
But he's a victim. He's a victim. He's in the Kingdom Hall. He's with his in Jehovah's Witness family, but he's a victim.
You don't get to be his uncle.
Relationship with his uncle. Yeah.
That's an important part of a child's upbringing is the influence
especially
of their
Jason
family.
is his uncle. I mean,
yeah.
Things get better,
I wish he was my uncle.
Who's he gonna have?
I can be your uncle now. Just call me Uncle Jay.
Uncle Comrade.
Yeah. Okay, there's a couple things we can get to here.
Security at the conventions. What's that going to be like?
Yeah. Okay.
Remember how laughable that used to be with the 4 guys on the corner of the stage looking out at the audience?
But along with that, Nash, let's talk about this for a bit, like security at the conventions, and also where the F were the angels? Like, the Watchtower claims to be somewhat protected, but yet they don't know how high the hedge goes, right? We're protected by God. We're God's organization, but we're not sure how high that hedge is. Well, you know what, mother effer? You would think the hedge would go that high, wouldn't you think, to stop the shooter? See, like, stuff like this makes me mad.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that's nearly salt on the wound when you read that the God of peace will continue to be a refuge and strength in his time of distress.
Exactly.
Hang on a second. 7 people died, and 8 people were injured, 4 of which were seriously injured. And you're saying God is going to be a refuge and strength? He wasn't a refuge and strength.
Apparently there was 2 angels that were protecting some woman, some mythical woman who went out in service and knocked on the wrong door. We all know the story. Oh, I didn't want to, where the criminal said, oh, I didn't want to spend too much time with her and the 2 other guys. Oh, there wasn't 2 other guys. There's 2 angels standing beside her. Right. So how do you square this with what happened? It's just such bullshit.
Yeah, this kind of stuff really, I think, will cause witnesses to take pause and think. I know I'm always go back to my own issues, but with my brother's suicide, that was a sticking point for me, was how we were told that, that you'll never be tempted beyond what you can bear, because Jehovah makes the way out. And that never went away for me, even as long as I stayed in after. I always wondered about that scripture, like, how do they teach that? And then so what does that mean? Does that mean the person who kills himself has lost faith? Or so obviously Jehovah doesn't love them anymore, because he's supposed to make the way out, right? And then in this same case, like, how do you square that with your beliefs that Jehovah protects you? Like, that's a test of faith that he allows a shooter to walk in and take a bunch of innocent people's lives. Am I supposed to take solace in the story of Job, that he got a whole new family? Does that make it better? Like, does Job not think about his old family that's all dead because he got a new family? If you think about it any longer than 2 seconds, you sit and think, this is all bullshit.
Yeah, but you know what? A lot of Jehovah's Witnesses already are saying, wasn't it great that Jehovah had saved that woman so she was able to notify the police and be able to save all these people?
Yeah.
But why was he there in the first place? Why couldn't God have it? Let's say it was that Satan that had got into the mind of this man. Could God not have countered what Satan is doing so that he doesn't go and kill God's people? These are God's people, and the whole question with the Job and Satan and God was that Job was allowed to be tested by Satan, but he wasn't allowed to harm him. So is it not the same way? This is God's people. You can do all you want on planet Earth, Satan, but you can't harm my people. Could he not have done the same thing? But here we have is people being harmed by Satan's influence. So in one sense, it's God protects us when everything good happens, but then time and unforeseen occurrences happen in every other situation. It's just, you're just covering yourself any which way you want with the Bible. And this is what I think makes religious beliefs so very ridiculous, because the Bible can be used in any which way you want just to give you some sort of solace. But really, 7 people died and didn't need to die.
Yeah. And all their families are there right now. Like, they're all going through hell, and the families, all those that are in the hospital still, and all the people that witnessed it. It's not something that's just going to be breaking news and gone, like the website. This is real people that have to deal with this for the rest of their lives, and everybody will just carry on like it didn't matter. It's not fair to them, and really, it's not fair to witnesses with those excuses that they just don't hold any weight.
I have to bring up something we've already talked about, but I don't know if you guys have been paying attention to the and let's just rehash this a little bit. There's been quite a few comments there about people that know individuals that needed help. And, when you're a witness, the first place you go is the elders, right? you go to the elders for help. You tell the and this is people that should be sent to professional medical help, and it doesn't happen. Do you guys think there's ever going to be a change in that, where the elders are now going to be forced to take some sort of counseling program where they know when to forward somebody to medical help and when they can maybe do something? Because it's just every second. I mean, there's only a few people in this live broadcast, and we've had like 10 different examples, and you guys have mentioned a couple here. It just happens all the time. The training of the elders needs to increase. There needs to be more training here. And do you think anything's ever going to happen there?
I don't. I think this is their advice here. Watchtower this month is mental health, help from the Bible. And this is going to be Watchtower's answer till the end of time. God cares for you, prayer, comfort from the scriptures, benefit from Bible examples. That's going to be Job. I can pretty much guarantee it. The Bible offers practical advice and how to help those with mental health challenges, which just says to basically be a friend. And then God promises perfect mental health. There's your solution.
Yeah.
Just put the X on. Don't worry about it, because paradise is going to be here soon. And then you're going to feel better.
I call it the 5.1 plan. And it's the 5.1 plan, 5.1, right? And what I mean by that is, right, the 5 things are study, meeting attendance, preaching, prayer, and what's the 5th one? I'm missing something. I said, what's it say? Regular meeting attendance, prayer, Bible study, preaching, and they have another one. You might have listed it there, actually, Nash. Is it on the list there? There's a 5th thing, and I have
well, there's the Bible examples.
Bible reading.
Bible reading. That's it.
Bible reading.
So Bible reading.
Right.
So you've studied, you've watched our, you've your study, you've your Bible reading. Right. So they're the 5
daily
things.
Bible reading.
Right. And the one, and it's all so that you can get into paradise. Yeah. So that's the plan for everything. So if you have any illness, be it mental illness, physical illness, you're feeling sad, well, you know what? You need to do more Bible study. You need to be reading the Bible. You need to be going out in ministry. You should be going to your meetings regularly so that you get all that comfort and necessary spiritual food, which is, as Millstone research always says, when you hear the word spiritual, just change it to imaginary. So when you get all that imaginary fruit, then you can get to this imaginary world called paradise. But that is it. That's the cure for every single issue that Jehovah's Witnesses have, including mental health. The 5.1 plan.
It's ridiculous. So we had a comment from Cyber AKTIF 66, whatever that is. And they're talking about they're going through a tough time right now with shunning. And all 3 of us have been through what they're going through. What do you guys think? What can a person do? Obviously, if it's really bad, seek some counseling, right? I mean, that's the first thing that we would say that elders are not going to tell you, right? Seek some help. But what else? What else can you guys think of that would help somebody that's going through a tough time dealing with this horrible punishment the Watchtower puts on us?
I think you have to. There's no way to replace family, and even close friends. You're not going to replace them, I would say, but you need to work on a new support system, and it doesn't come fast and it doesn't come easy. And I know that if you don't have that, if you don't have other people to talk to, and it doesn't have to be about your mental health issues. If you don't have somebody to talk to just about the hockey game last night or whatever it is, we're social creatures. That's what we need. And a lot of that stuff, when it's gone like that, and especially the close family relationships are gone, it's devastating, and it can consume you and overwhelm you if you allow it to. And So I think if you recognize that and you seek to try and mitigate it a bit, you can say replace it, but work to try and extend your social circle a bit. And the ex-JW community is good. I mean, it's a great community. There's lots of support, lots of good friends there. But try and find some real human friends in your where you live. Find some people to have a coffee with or a beer with or whatever you're into. And I know that that'll help mitigate that. But number one, you're going to need therapy, and don't lose faith if the first therapist doesn't help. You might need 2 or 3. I know it took me quite a few, and I gave up a couple times and just kept down a downward spiral. And when I finally found one that worked, she was great, and got me through those hard times. And I still go, once, maybe a year or something, just to catch up. And I don't feel the need to go really, but it always feels good to go. So I think it's good to keep up with that stuff, because sometimes we start to get back into negative patterns, especially of self-loathing and guilt, and those things are really damaging. And being shunned, I think that's an easy groove to fall into, is where you really feel bad about yourself, because these people, by treating you like you're worthless, make you feel worthless, and you're not worthless. So you need to work through that stuff.
Yeah, so I kind of echo a lot of your sentiments there, Nash. But I have what I call the alternative 5.1 plan.
Sorry, did I interrupt your 5? Yeah, sorry. Okay, let's get back to it.
It's another 5.1.
Yes. So this 5.1 plan is a much better, more effective. It doesn't rely on imaginary activities or things that are basically just help an organization. So, right, if we talk about prayer, instead of prayer, right, you can have prayer if you're a religious type of person, but if you're not a religious type of person, have a good talk with yourself. You should always have a good talk with yourself anyway. You should always meditate about things and consider them, because you can get a better perspective on things when you think it out before rationally doing something, right? So that's number one. Have a good chat with yourself. And I'm not talking about thinking about things. You shouldn't be thinking about things and getting negative, because that'll just depress you. You want to just have a good talk to yourself, and think things out, and sometimes have that conversation with another person if it can help you, because sometimes talking with someone else, especially someone that's looking at it because you can get so closed in on what you're talking about that you can't see the wood for the trees. So then there's that study. Now, study can be anything. It doesn't have to be studying your Watchtower, whatever. You want to have study. And study can be reading a book, right? It can be just a book to get your mind off things. Or it could be something that can be a self-help. It can be something that can help you become a better person. Because if you can become a better person, you can become a happier person. And you can read books that have anything to do with self-help and about your health and your mental well-being as well. That's study as well, and that can help you. Right, so that's number 2. And then we talk about, they talk about regular meeting attendance, right? Enough of that nonsense, because you're just sitting there and you do nothing. What we want is, you want regular social activities with other people. You need to have interaction with other humans. If you don't have that interaction, you need to go find it. Either go to a library. You can sit down, read a book. You can probably meet someone right beside you. You can go to a painting place where they're trained to paint, and you can meet other people like that. You can go to a musical place, whatever it is that you're into, be at the pub, anywhere. But you need to have social interaction. You have to have regular social interaction, because otherwise you get very down and all the rest, right? And then you have the preaching work, right? Instead of the preaching work, what you want to do is you want to get out. You want to have a regular walk. You want to get some fresh air. You need to get out. People have to get out. You got to get your vitamin D. Without your vitamin D, none of this is ever going to work, right? So you have to do that. And what was the 5th one? We got prayer.
What was the 5th one?
Oh, daily Bible reading.
Bible reading. So that's just reading something. Always have something to, just have something to be, and that doesn't have to be a physical book. That could be an audio book or something, whatever it makes that you can get out of it. And it can be just a coloring book, whatever you enjoy. But that's the 5-point plan to a happy life. That's my alternative, rather than the job.
I can just speak from my personal experience, and I know when I was going through the waking up process, and I was shunned as well after that. I did go through and I think a lot of ex-JWs do this. You go through a research period where you do a lot of reading, right? Um, I don't want to minimize. Like, I'm not a religious person right now. Okay, I don't go to church. I don't, none of that. I don't necessarily believe in God. I mean, God, a God-ish type thing. Could it? Anyway, that's what I believe. But don't minimize other spiritual teachings. Like I know I read a lot of Eckhart Tolle. I don't read any of Eckhart Tolle now, none. But at the time, I actually found him very helpful in getting myself off of like negative thoughts. And so the only reason I'm mentioning that is because there is other religious groups and other type of spiritual things that you can explore. And I found they were really helpful, even though I have nothing really to do with them now. Just because the witnesses were damaging doesn't mean that every spiritual organization is. Some are actually quite helpful.
It's funny.
And even the simple fact of that's one way to go out and meet other people. There's lots of religions that are not super strict like the witnesses are. You can go in there. You don't have to wear a suit, right? The women don't have to wear a dress. They can wear whatever they want. And it's a much more open and inviting place,
Yeah, it's funny you brought that up because, recently I've had a few people reach out to me and kind of, they're fairly new out, going through those first stages and struggling a bit with things. And I've been out long enough now that I think I've kind of forgotten how that felt. Not forgotten, but I don't think about it regularly, right? You don't remember how that felt when you were first out. So it took me a minute to think back to what I did. And it's funny you brought up Eckhart Tolle because, I read all the Eckhart Tolle books. And it's a lot of hippie woo stuff. I read The Four Agreements, a few times over and over again by Don Ruiz. A lot of those self-help books. I even read Jordan Peterson's 12 Steps, and I hate Jordan Peterson now. But those, at the time, because of where my headspace was at, I pulled little things out of every one of those books that helped open my mind outside of that Jehovah's Witness bubble that I was so held in. And I even, I don't know if you know this, but I spent some time in jail. And while I was in there, I did a ton of...
you had a lot of time to read there.
Yeah, a lot of time. And I did all the Christian studies that you were allowed to do in there, right? You could do courses. So that's one thing you're allowed to do. Religion's great in jail because they love it. So I did all of their studies. And it was easy because I grew up with the Bible so much. But that was another thing that really opened my mind as to the fact that Jehovah's Witnesses... we weren't much different than any other religion, and it helped me appreciate the fact that they're all kind of the same. And for myself, I realized that it was all nonsense. But for some people, they still derive some meaning from that, and they still believe in God, and they believe in that spiritual side of their life. And if that's where you find yourself, I think go for it. If it's not harming you and it's helping you, then that's fine. Just don't join another cult.
Yeah. Even ex-JW cults, hey Jason?
Yeah. Those are real.
We won't go there.
No.
Not the time.
Not today, Satan.
But they do exist.
Oh, I just wanted to talk about something, Greg, right? So I'm taking over a little bit here, but
it is
can we talk about
Jason?
Oh, can we talk about weirdos in Jehovah's Witnesses?
Sure.
I think, but this is what we're talking about. We're talking about guys that are not mentally well, or people that are not mentally well within Jehovah's Witnesses, and I think we all have experience of that. Now, most of them are harmless. They're not that crazy in the loony, not to the level of this guy was, but they have crazy. They do crazy things outside that might embarrass you by their actions and whatever. But I just want to give a couple of examples. There was one guy, now he was absolutely harmless. But you turn up at a meeting and he had some strange manners. It's like he was on the spectrum but never identified.
Mm-hmm.
And so because it was never treated, he's acted a certain way. But I went to one of the meetings there, like back in 2017, and they were all given they had printed off all these cards. I don't know if there were memorial invitations, right? So we say one of the brothers was going around the congregation with a stack of 100 of them, and he would place a bunch of them on each of the rows so that they could pass them out. But this guy was sitting across from me, and he gets the card, and he's like, this with it. And it's like this, and he's turning it, and he's putting it upside down, and he's straightening it out. And I'm just looking at this guy, and I'm going, what is wrong? And, I've known this guy for years, and he was always a little weird, but it seems that he's got older. He's got even weirder.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I was at the meetings all the time and I'm seeing them all the time, maybe I'd be so used to his strange behavior. But had anyone ever thought to ask him or tried to see about getting him some help and assistance to try and see whether, they can minimize some of his strange behavior? But I don't think they do.
No.
But have you any examples? Because there was another guy, right? There was these brothers. Now, they were always a little bit strange, but they never got baptized. But they used to come to the meetings a lot, and they came with their mother, and they lived with their mother. And they were well into their 40s and 50s, living at home with their mammy. But they kind of went off the rails, and one would be walking around town, swinging from poles and singing out songs, of praise to Jehovah type of stuff, and talking about Jehovah all the time out loud while they're walking down the street. But they kind of stopped going to the meetings, but still had all of these Jehovah traits about them going around town. And it's just like, oh, I don't know this guy, gotta hide. So it seems to be, to me, and I could be wrong, I can't imagine that it's just peculiar to my congregation. I wonder, have you examples of that?
Oh, yeah.
Do any of the viewers have any examples?
Remember the guy with the life-size dollhouse in his backyard, Greg?
Yes.
Yeah. And he had like a mannequin in it, like a doll.
What?
Like a human-sized mannequin doll. And,
He did?
He did. Because some of the young guys in the hall stole it one time and took it to Edmonton and took pictures of it, like at bars. And,
I didn't know that.
And then they put it back with the pictures. And then, and these young guys thought it was the best thing ever, but he never found out. But because he was too embarrassed to talk about his life-size doll. And this guy had a family and like a kid and just a total weirdo. And everybody just kind of was like, we all knew it, but it was like, that's fine.
Yeah, no, I think we all, I can, as you're talking, Jason and Nash, I can think of many examples in congregations. And I don't know, like I'm a real statistics guy. I love statistics. I'm a weirdo. Does the Watchtower attract more weirdos? Well, it's a cult, right? It's a cult.
Well, and I think to that point, Greg, is the fact that Watchtower is great because if you're a little nutty, it's hard to have friends, right? It's hard to make friends because people are like, that guy's a little nutty. I don't really want to associate with him very much. But when you're a witness, you automatically have friends and everybody has to be friends with you. And now twice a week, you get to go see your 100 friends and you get to call them and hang out with them in service and do all the things. And they all have to be like, it's okay that you're weird because...
Well, remember the Watchtower. I think I'll make a blanket statement about the organization. It is a sweep things under. I'm air quoting, sweep things under the rug organization, right? I mean, there's so many things. Like if you're breaking Watchtower policies and rules, then you're going to get sent to the elders. But if you're just weird or doing things, that people sweep things under the rug a lot in this organization, right? So, I can see weird behavior going just, really even kind of unacknowledged and definitely undealt with. And again, you're dealing with elders here who have no training whatsoever, and also they exist in a cult like the Watchtower. So do the elders themselves ever really mature to be like a, would you describe like a well-adjusted person? I mean, I some do, but I don't know. Like, can you really be a wise person and be in that organization? Is that possible? Not really, is it?
No, well, I just want to apologize to Kim. She says weird just kind of offends me. These are vulnerable people. That's true.
Oh,
Bad choice of words. But there is strange behavior, obviously, from these certain individuals. That, obviously are a lot of them are vulnerable people. But I think the point I wanted to make was just about this individual. I mean, he's obviously was a megalomaniac, had delusions of grandeur. He says like about his book. He says in it, he says things like, there's no reason to worry about the future. Instead, believe in God's will and Jesus Christ. As Philip Fuse, he talks about himself in the third person, has been doing for years. And he talks about his book as being an excellent book to deepen your interest in God and humanity. It can also be cumulative for all persons who hold a position or leading role in the economy and or earthly and religious programs. There's a Jehovah's Witness term, earthly. But, he tended to mix his theology of Jehovah's Witnesses with his education because he was an educated man. This guy had a master's in business, so he was well educated. But then he says strange things that he saw his book as an apocryphal work that is required reading for leaders in various sciences, and he demanded a daily rate of 250,000 euro. I mean, wow. Who asked for that kind of money? But he says you get it back by you get up to 2.5 million.
Yeah,
but I think he forgot to do the maths because just 10 days with him will cost you 2.5 million. But this guy had serious delusions of grandeur. That he overcompensated for himself, thinking he was much more important than he actually was.
Yeah,
and that's the type of people you tend to see as well within Jehovah's Witnesses, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, Kim says educated people have mental health issues too, i.e., me, right? And I think of myself too, like, I am kind of a weirdo a little bit, and I mean that in like I like who I am, but the thing is that this organization, we spent our formative years in a cult, right? And it does kind of affect you, right? And it can breed kind of issues, right, that you have to deal with and get over. So we talk about there being strange people, but the Watchtower creates them, really, in a way, like visions of ideas of grandeur. I mean, that is the Watchtower calls itself a humble and makes humble people. They make the exact opposite to humble people, right? And so yeah, there is strange people in that organization, but I'm one of them, and it's a lot of it is not your fault. It's not these people's fault. The organization, in my opinion, creates a lot of this.
Well, and they like to say that it's like a family, right? And that's kind of how you feel, like it's like a family, and the elders are sort of like the parents a little bit in the family that are there to support you and help you through your tough times and discipline you when you're being an idiot. And the reality is that, that what we're talking about when people are acting in a way that maybe isn't harmful per se, but maybe they could use some help, or they could use some support in some way. If your kid's acting out strange, do you just look the other way and whatever? I mean, that's, as a parent, you try and help your kids, and if they have some kind of an issue, you address it and you seek out help for it. Watchtower doesn't do that. They have this idea that it's that way, but it's not that way. They have their answers. They got the 5.1 plan from Jason Wynne, and that's it. You read and you go to the meetings and you pray and service, and that's always the answer. It doesn't matter what it is. If you got a giant dollhouse in your backyard, or you're an alcoholic Same plan.
Yeah, exactly. The same plan for everybody.
But I just want to say to Kim, yeah, I love her too. But did you know what? It's funny because I was thinking as well. Well, have I had delusions of grandeur when I was a Jehovah's Witness, or even now? And I was thinking, you know what? At one time, I probably did. I used to go to, I used to work. Well, actually, I still work for a medical device company, right? But years ago, I worked for a different medical device company, and I used to go to the canteen, and I had friends, non-JW friends, but I used to look down on everyone because I felt Armageddon is coming very soon. And all you people here, despite the fact that you're trying to make the better world, you can never ultimately make a better world. We have to rely on Jehovah, is in my thoughts. And you're all going to die, but I'm going to paradise very soon. And it's a pity, really. This is the kind of thoughts you'd have in your head. I had in my head. So I had delusions of grandeur at one point.
Yeah, you're very important.
I think it's great though, coming out of Jehovah's Witnesses, that you and I think it's for a lot of ex-JWs that I've spoken with, and for JWs that have just recently waken up, because that you learn empathy. And to a greater extent than you might have had before. You now look at people that, this is the life we have now, and let's make the best of it, not just for ourselves, but for everyone else. And we become nicer people. And I like to think that most of us ex-JWs, we're here to support one another. We have empathy. We're looking at not just the victims in this shooting. We're looking at the shooter, and we have empathy for him.
Yeah.
We don't condone his actions, and we find them absolutely despicable and detestable, but we have empathy for what he might have been going through to lead him to go to that level. And I think we need to have that empathy to be able to understand, rather than just say, no, he was an awful evil person. Yes, he was an awful evil person, but all at the end of the day, he was still human. Like the rest of us, he did grow up in probably a good environment with his family and friends, but somewhere along the line, something went wrong.
And there's mitigating circumstances that not very many people in the public are going to be aware with this individual.
Yeah. They'll try to overlook all of that, right? And I mean, we deal with this. Americans deal with it all the time with mass shootings, and why do we have I feel like every other month we have an anti-bullying campaign at our schools, and the kids are wearing pink shirts, and they're talking about that kind of stuff, and they're going through their what do they do, those little practices where they hide under their desks and stuff, and they're doing all this crazy lockdown things that we never did as kids, because bullies were just allowed to be bullies, and and I mean, in Canada we don't get that kind of reaction where a kid comes back and does that, but this stuff happens, and we do see that there are reasons for it. It's not an excuse for it, but there are things that attribute to why someone behaves in a way they do, or they act out in a crazy, inhumane way. And so it's no different to point it out in this case that there are things that may have contributed to that, and those same policies that contributed are still in place. They're still being enforced. Nothing's going to change on Watchtower's side. And so what stops this from happening again? More guys parked outside the door? I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you, is the Watchtower, I know I've kind of asked this question already once, but I'll ask it in a slightly different way. Do you think the Watchtower is going to make any changes here other than maybe more security? Is that it? Is that all they're going to do?
Well, if you look back to 1985, when an individual had gone into the Kingdom Hall and planted a bomb and exploded, killing one person and injuring countless other people, right? That was, I think, in May 1985, and then by later that year, the Watchtower had, I think it was the November 1985 Watchtower, they had done an article. But when you read the article, it's a very long article, right? At this point, the bomber had never been known. They had presented the whole event in a certain way, in the typical way that they always present it, in that Jehovah's Witnesses were persecuted, and that, you know, God was obviously here, had helped us because only one died, whereas those who had investigated felt a lot more should have died. And then that, you know, there was all the care and the love shown by the brothers for the congregation, and for the families that were affected. And, you know, then a load of, and it also gave a witness, because people saw how we were so close knit together and helped one another, that some wanted to know more about Jehovah's Witnesses. And then a lot of other Jehovah's Witnesses provided money to the organization. So this is the change I see Watchtower doing, is that they will write an article about this and phrase it and frame it a certain way to be able to benefit themselves from it, because that's all that they do. Remember, the Watchtower organization, as I see it, is a virus. It just latches on, gets as much as it can, and moves on. And that's what they'll do with this situation. They'll create an article some months from now, and present it, maybe even a couple of weeks from now, and present it a certain way. And always that the apostates, and that's what they did that time, the apostates, the opposers, were trying to frame it as some negative thing. And they'll do the same with this situation.
Yeah, agree.
Yeah, you know, I worked in the sales industry for quite a while, and then I had enough of it. I just can't be involved in that anymore, because it reminds me too much of being a witness, you know, and how you turn every single thing that the person says, every single thing is, you're taught how to twist that to get them to do what you want them to do, right? What, you know, buy something, or, you know, sign up for whatever, right? And the Watchtower, that's what they do. They twist every single thing to show, this proves that we were right, and you know, this is you know, we're going to use this in such a way to get more members. They're just fanatically fixated on that, right? Whereas, you know, you would think a just and a moral organization would say, what could we have done to maybe change this outcome? Is there anything we could have done where this maybe wouldn't have happened? Is there something to do with our policies? You know, did we contribute to this in any way, even if it's just a small, tiny bit? Maybe we could change something, but they won't do that. They will not do that.
Right. I work for a multinational corporation, right? Yeah. And I can see I can make direct comparisons between the corporation that I work for and the Watchtower Corporation. Yeah. Right.
For sure.
It's all they look about is growth in terms of value of their product. So if they can sell more product, they'll grow. They'll become, we'll say, a $4 billion company to a $5 billion company within a 5-year period, right? So that's growth for a corporation. Jehovah's Witnesses, it's the exact same. To have a growth, it's all about growth. So, and then they need to have forecasts, and I'm sure they do have forecasts, and they have to figure out how to get their employees, which is all the Jehovah's Witnesses, to be able to do more time. And how do we figure this out so that we can grow? And it's all about growth. So so when an event like this happens, how can we turn this around so that we can grow? And everything is very corporate in its approach. Yeah. So, like we talk about the change in the pioneer hours. Well, the change in that pioneer hours so that they can figure out another way to grow. And so then when we look at this situation, is how are we going to present this in a way that we can grow, and can we grow from it? Well, let's see what we'll do. We put in Michael Fidaris in, and he has to do damage control. We need that first and foremost. So get him there to the police conference and get him to present this situation in a certain way, so that has nothing to do with the Jehovah's Witnesses, that it's just this lunatic guy that came in, and he was a disgruntled former member. Because at the end of the day, we got to reduce the negative effect on it so that we can grow.
Yeah.
And that's how they present everything. Everything is clinically done. It's all like in a corporate way. The way any corporation works, present things a certain way. You always want to do damage control, especially if you had a device that caused harm, because that's what this guy was. He was a device that the Jehovah's Witnesses manufactured, and it was faulty.
Let me ask you something here, Jason, and Nash. So we know that the Watchtower has a media kind of outlet. We've talked about this on the Twitter Spaces quite a bit, and Ron PMO was quite involved in that as well. They have like a media relations division. Now, Hamburg is a large city. We've learned it's about 2 million people, second largest city. I think it was the second largest city in Germany.
Yeah.
They probably have a media, maybe a few or a group of media relations people in that city. So they're probably, speak to that. They probably would have been on this, right? And trying to control it in some way. What do you guys think?
Well, that's who Michael
They did.
Ziffert is. He's
Yeah.
based in
Okay.
Hamburg.
Okay.
And he
Okay.
represents Hamburg and the surrounding states. So he's the representative for Jehovah's Witnesses in that area. So yeah, he was the man sent in to kind of do the damage control.
Yeah, it's about brand protection. That's all it is.
Now the thing is what I found very interesting is that shortly after his answering of questions, a lot of the media started referring to Philip Foos as a disgruntled former member.
Yeah.
Now you got to remember, in Norway, that's what they were doing. They're talking about disgruntled former member.
That was me too in my court case. Yeah.
In Spain, they refer to them as disgruntled former members.
Yeah.
And this is very dangerous for them, I believe, because if you start saying that it's a disgruntled former member that goes in killing people, that's one thing. But then if you're using the same brush to tarnish people that are just critics, well, then you have a problem, because now what you're saying is that these guys are at risk of also being suicide killers, and we're not. But I kind of like the fact that they've done that, because I think it's going to bring more attention upon themselves, because we are working in the background. We are doing things to kind of bring the attention to the authorities in Germany. And I think they've done us a favor by presenting the shooter in a particular light to kind of distance themselves from it. But by doing that, I think we're able now to take that and turn it around so that the police can actually go, hang on a second, all right, they're presenting it this way. Because we really, no one knows that he was a disgruntled former member. You can't say that someone was a disgruntled former member, not all in one word like that, because what you're saying is that he's disgruntled because of being a former member. Now, he could have been a disgruntled individual, which is a different thing. He's disgruntled for other reasons, not just from being kicked out of Jehovah's Witnesses. And that's more likely, that he's disgruntled because he went off and killed people, but it could have been for any reason. And I think they would have been better off of calling him a disgruntled individual rather than calling him a disgruntled former member.
Yeah.
Because what you've done, you had narrowed it down, the field of view, to this, when you don't have any evidence. Unless you do have evidence, well, then present it to the police.
Yeah, I think it's just sickening that they are using this same phrase, that they use to describe just a general person that is left that might have a problem with their policy, using that same phrase for this guy. And they're doing it on purpose. They're using that phrase on purpose.
Thoughts, Natch?
Yeah, no, I agree. With everything you guys said. That's and a lot of that is for their own membership, because they'll connect those dots without even thinking about it. They hear disgruntled former member and they've heard it in these other things, because they don't read these. I don't think they read these stories too closely, but they definitely read them, and so they see it and they think, yep, that's the bad guy. That's the other. That's what former witnesses do. They're out to get us. This one's a killer. That one's trying to get us banned in Norway, because that's how they paint that out, not for what it really is. And that's all their membership will think. And they will continue to shun people because they think that this is who they are. This is my family talks bad about, or, my family member talks bad about the Watchtower. They're a disgruntled former member. They're no different than this guy.
But, I wrote to the national newspaper here in Ireland, because they reported on the event. They did a couple of reports like all most newspapers around the world have been doing. But in one of them, they talked about the disgruntled former member. And I wrote to him. I wrote him a big, long article. I said why I took issue with the term disgruntled former member. And he came back and he said, "Thank you very much, Jason, for your very good analysis of why this term was used." He said, "Look, I just traveled 600 miles up from Berlin up to Hamburg to write this, and I had to get it out." And he said, "I believe that it was the police that actually used the term. And so I just use it without even thinking about it." But he said, "I'll change the term." So he said he changed the term, and he'd have it out in the print version. So I can't remember what the term was, but it was a very more neutral. I'll put it up on Twitter anyway, that it's a more neutral term. And I was glad that he did that. And I've been asking others that see it in their own local papers that they can write in. Now I have a template that I used, that I wrote it up and sent it to them. But if anyone wants that as a template, if they want to write to their own local newspapers, if they see that term, I'm more than happy to give it to them, because I think it's important that we get that term wiped off from newspapers. Shouldn't be saying a disgruntled former member.
It's a loaded term. Yeah.
A disillusioned former member is what he changed it to. Disillusioned, that's fine. It's less problematic.
Yeah. Well, you guys, it's been an hour and 30. I'm not ending it right now, but is there any last kind of thoughts you want to say about this Hamburg situation? Anything that we didn't get to, Jason or Nash, that you wanted to say?
One last thing I want to talk about. The anonymous letter. We didn't talk about that, did we?
No, we didn't.
No.
Right. So the anonymous letter was sent in about a month before the shooting, right? And it said that the writer asked for a review of Fooz's behavior, his mental health, his ill feelings towards Jehovah's Witnesses, and the weapons regulations. The letter also explained that Fooz may be suffering from a mental illness despite not being medically diagnosed. Right. So when the police got that, they called to your man's house unannounced, questioned him. Everything seemed fine. He was very upfront. He had a good conversation with him, which shows that the man was able to differentiate between any hate and whatever he might have had towards Jehovah's Witnesses, was able to convincingly hide that from the police, which I think I think Jehovah's Witnesses can do very well anyways. They can hide their true feelings about certain things, present things in a certain way, the whole white lying type of thing that we were trained to do. But we have to ask the question, who sent in the anonymous letter?
Yes.
Was the anonymous letter sent in by a family member, or was it sent in by the Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah.
Now, it was obviously someone who was close enough to this guy, knew his actions, knew his behavior, but when it specifically said that it was ill feelings towards Jehovah's Witnesses, I tend to believe that it was the congregation elders that wrote the letter and instructed so by the branch. I'm sure they contacted the branch, gave them all the details that they possibly had on this individual. And it can take a couple of months back and forth between the branch and between these elders. So if you can imagine that it was in December 2022 that he had written his book, and it was around the same time that he got his guns. And someone knew that he had these guns. And I'm sure that there was conversation between the branch. I'm almost certain of it, between the branch. And then the branch said, you know what, send a letter to the police, giving them these details. Do not identify yourselves. Do not say who you are, your position in the organization. And do not, under any circumstances, say that you're connected to Jehovah's Witnesses. And I believe it was them that sent it in. And in one sense, then, if it turns out that it was actually Jehovah's Witnesses that sent in, they actually play a part in the deaths of these individuals, of their own members. Because if they had actually sent it in with written by someone with a contact address, the police could have sufficiently followed up with that and found out more about this individual, and maybe would have taken the guns off,
or had a conversation with somebody face to face that's willing to, go to the police personally, and like that brings up so many issues there. about reporting, about religions reporting to police when they have a situation like this. This horrible thing about the Watchtower concerning themselves so much with their reputation, that they're willing to put other people's safety behind their reputation. Their reputation's more important. Again, we don't know who sent the letter, so let's acknowledge that we don't know. But with them and with the Watchtower's, fanatical attempt to protect their reputation, you can see that totally being a plausible events that took place there.
Yep. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add on that. I was thinking, today being Saturday, all the witnesses will be out all over the world doing their thing. And because this is international news, people will, they'll be Googling it. They'll be looking on YouTube for anything related to it. So I guess maybe we should just give our thoughts on what people, should take away from this, or maybe things we'd want people to know when they look at this situation. I know for myself, I thought that it's important if you're talking to a Jehovah's Witness, to question them on shunning. That's, people say, Phil, tell them to put me on your do not call list. I say a better way to get rid of them is to just question them on shunning. Ask them if they would shun their kids, if they'd shun their parents when they come to your door, and see how they respond. And worst thing that happens is they go away and they think about it later. And that I think is a step in the right direction as far as that goes. And then I think for us, it's important that we don't. I've seen the odd crazy tweet about almost saying that this is Watchtower's getting what they deserve kind of stuff.
Yeah,
that has you can't. It's gross. There's no place for it. Nobody deserves it, and nobody had it coming to them. It's not okay. This is a tragedy. And it's horrendous. And as much as we despise Watchtower's policies and some of the treatment that it doles out to its members and former members, don't get on that train at all. These are real people, and they're suffering, and there's no excuse for any kind of hate or jokes regarding it.
But before you showed up, Nash, we were talking about how these witnesses, there are people. I mean, we're ex-witnesses, but we all grew up in the organization, right? I don't have any hate towards. I wish I could still be friends with all of my witness people that I grew up with. I miss them terribly. I don't have any hate towards them. And when I see things like this, these are like my people. So the reason why we're having this is not to in any way justify anything that this person did. It's just to give a little bit more context that maybe the news organizations are not going to. This is a terrible thing that happened. These were our people, but this is kind of maybe the rest of the story.
Yeah, I just want to say that there's a couple of comments there. So I'd like to also thank Tall Cool Women that she's enjoyed the interesting, informative conversation. I'd just like to thank all of the people for actually joining us tonight. Yeah. There was a question there from David Espinoza, says, does the branch have a tendency to send anonymous letters? Right, so that's a good question, David, because the thing is when it comes to, for example, child sexual abuse, in some cases, the branch will instruct elders to report it, but unless they're legally required to, they'll tell them to send it in anonymously. Because they do not want to bring any focus on the Jehovah's Witness religion at all, because they prefer not to report child sexual abuse, but in some cases they may have to, just to protect the greater public. So yeah, if they do it for child sexual abuse, you can be certain that they'll do it for other events too. And with a case where a guy has a gun and he has mental illness, they're not legally required to identify themselves. So yeah, they would send in a letter anonymously.
Well, thank you for that, Jason, clearing that up. Okay, so I'm I'm going to kind of slowly wrap things up here. I just want to talk about the channel for 1 minute. We were doing Twitter Spaces where we're inviting, and Twitter Spaces is great actually because we can have lots of different people join in and talk, because we don't want to be the ones to always be talking, right? What do you guys think? Should we do more of these live shows on YouTube and then try and tell people, hey, listen, anybody can come and speak? I mean, I don't care. I mean, if there's people that are causing problems, we'll just kick them out. But most people, I think, would be welcome. You know what I mean? What do you guys think? Should we do more live shows, or is the Twitter thing better where people don't have to show their face?
Just leave it in the comments.
Yeah, leave it in the comments. Let us know. All 28 of you. I don't know.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't know what to do.
You mean 28,000? Each person is equivalent to 1,000.
Yeah,
yes,
it's Bible math. I love Bible math. It always works in my favor. One person answered
my comment. Live works. They like the YouTube Live.
Yeah, I like YouTube Live. I think we should do more of these.
Yeah, I like them.
Then
actually,
I have to comb my hair.
JT and Lady C have been doing them lately, and it's good. I think it's really good.
Well, it's a lot easier for me. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. The reason why our channel hasn't done a lot of is because I have my own business, and like you guys have busy lives. It's like 3-4 hours of editing for each video, right? And I mean, I would just love to be that person that can do all of that, and I'd love to, but I'm not, right? I can do it sometimes, but what do you think, Jay?
Do you have to do much editing when it's live, or can you just publish it?
No, that's what I mean. Like, that's why this is way better. It's done.
It's a no-brainer.
Okay, yeah. So let's do it again here. We know others, and it's so much easier.
Yeah, we've already had. I had a guy ask. He wants to come on.
Yeah.
As one of the co-hosts or whatever too. So,
nice.
I mean, if you want to, just message us or email us or tweet us or whatever you got to do, and we'll try and fit people in.
Okay, everybody. Jay, Nash, you stay here. Don't go anywhere. We're going to talk for 5 minutes, but everybody else, thanks for coming. And maybe EXJW-Live will do a few more of these. And hey, if you want to come on, this is an open invitation. You don't even have to comb your hair. See, I didn't. I'll show up next time with my hair uncombed, and you can see. You don't have to comb your hair. You don't have to shave. You just have to have clothes. Clothes preferred.
I don't know.
Okay. You don't need clothes.
We get a lot more views. Required. You would get more than 29 people.
Yeah.
Not with us, but other guests. I don't know.
Okay. Thanks for your comments, everybody. See you later.
See you guys.